I don't know who's going to be listening to the podcast. What I want to show them and highlight to the audience is that anything is possible, no matter where your mindset is, no matter what you're passionate about. You can make that into a business. As you get started, you are going to start building that podcast muscle. You're going to start building that video muscle. You're going to build that speech muscle. And the more you work on it, the better you're going to get at it.
Mhm.
And sometimes even faster than others. I use ChatGPT to create dashboards for a specific applications
Mhm.
because I have expertise in that area.
Mhm.
I'm able to ask very specific questions
'Cause you
and
know.
get very specific data from it.
Welcome back to the show, Junaid Ahmed, aka SuperJunaid, the host of the Hacks and Hobbies podcast. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me again, Destin. I'm super excited to be here.
Dustin Miller, poly-innovator.
Innovators crave innovative products, which is exactly why the Polymath Polycast is powered by Riverside.fm.
Yeah, let's jump in.
This is the round 2 polycast, as I call it, because it's ding ding, round 2, we're back at it again. But ironically for you, this is our third time because a week and a half ago we did the live interview over at Podcast
That's right.
Movement.
That's right. That was a ton of fun, especially meeting in person, having
Oh
that
my
conversation face to face. It's like,
Yeah.
whoa, this is so much.
It's so weird too because I did not know what I wanted to ask you in that moment. I thought about it a couple days prior, and of course, in retrospect, I was like, "Oh, I should ask him about his home studio or something like that." But in that moment, I had to come up with questions on the fly, and that was definitely an interesting experience to actually, as a host, to do.
Mhm.
It was so novel as a experience.
It is, right? Because when you're in person, you don't really necessarily have a notebook or a laptop in front of you. You don't have any of the comfort things that you're
Yeah.
used to. For example, when I'm talking in person or online, I have my notes up. I've got things that I know I'm going to talk about, and I kind of have that that comfort of being in my own home and not having to think
Yeah.
on the spot. But when you're in person, it just changes the game altogether.
Well, I have my notes open right here. I'm used to looking at the camera though, so some people have commented on my videos like, "You look away a lot," and it's like, "Yeah, because I got to look at my notes." Like, I could try to have my notes right there, but I don't have a teleprompter. I can't just like read them off the screen.
Mhm.
But unlike you in this case. But yeah, it's interesting because this show I try to do a more rapid style format, but I
Mhm.
realized that given how, like, for example, you and I would talk, would just go on for a while. There's not really a rapid style to being polymathic. We have so many things to talk about, and
Yeah.
we have time. We might as well go into those things. And I will say, maybe we can talk about this a little bit later, but I'm restructuring my show a little bit. I'm curious to
Mhm.
see what you're thinking about with Hacks and Hobbies and your new podcast we'll get into. So, first and foremost, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Cannot ask for a better time in space in this, being here,
Mhm.
because the truth of the matter is we're all growing and getting better at communicating at
Mhm.
whatever you're working on, and so doing pretty well. I just started teaching high school
Oh, wow.
entrepreneurship.
That's so
So
cool.
that's again, it goes into the back point of, hey, it is an in-person conversation. I have my laptop that I can look at the notes, but again, I gotta connect with the people in physical space. So
Mhm.
it's kind of a new experience, but I'm loving it.
When I was in middle school, junior high, and high school, I always knew that I wanted to go into business and be an entrepreneur. I had that from a young age. So I was very
Mhm.
lucky in that case where I was able to plan out all my courses that I took, all the electives. And I remember being in like ninth grade, taking intro to business and intro to money management and just
Mhm.
learning about entrepreneurship. And from that young age, too, no less, it definitely changes how you perceive things as you get older.
Yeah. It definitely opens you up for a much stronger future and much more uh, clear
Mm.
future because you're in that entrepreneurial mindset, being able to switch from one area, being able to pivot, and then thinking clearly, and that anything is achievable. I think that's super important as an entrepreneur, having that mindset.
Well, and one thing that's very prevalent to this show too, being polymathic, entrepreneurs have to wear many hats. I've interviewed a lot of
Hmm.
entrepreneurs on this show because of that
Yeah.
reason. And it's interesting how people try to think in a specialist mindset, but when you're an entrepreneur, you have to be able to wear the hats because if you can't hire somebody to do that thing for you, then you have to do it.
Yes. So true. So true. And the powerful thing about being an entrepreneur is that you want to, from the get go, have a team set up,
Hmm.
because if you were to work alone, solopreneur it, it's going to take you 10 times as long to get to somewhere if you were to do with a team, because not only are you multiplying your time, you're also multiplying the brain power, the energy that comes through. You don't need to self motivate anymore because you have three or four other people that are motivating you and in it for the long run. And there's a ton of examples if you look at shows like Silicon Valley, shows like startups, shows like these that are on television. There's always three or four people that are in the startup. There's only three or four people that are working on a project, and that's what's powerful about working together and having that team from the get-go.
It's almost as if you're talking to me directly because I am a solopreneur and I need to have a team. But I'm glad to have you back on the show too, because even though we had our live in-person interview, it was obviously shorter. I like to go a little bit longer and get a little bit more aspects behind your life too. So
Mhm.
this is the round two on the show. What have you been doing since the first time you came on? And kind of like, feel free to say the same things if you did on the live stuff too.
Man, what have I been doing? So we probably spoke 3 years ago, and
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
right. So from that 3 years ago, I didn't know that I was going to be helping entrepreneurs set up home studios. Right. So that was just getting born, just getting set up, mainly because I was solving a problem that I faced myself.
Yeah.
And as I solved that problem for myself, I started seeing people ask me about, hey, how did you do that? Can you help me? And as I helped them, as I told them what they needed, it began apparent it became apparent that this is something that not only am I passionate about,
Hmm.
but it's also something that's helping others grow and build confidence and come into uh, coming into this entrepreneurship of creating content.
Yeah.
Now we've seen a ton of people grow and have entrepreneurship or have videos. For example, Frank Kern, Tony Robbins, all of these entrepreneurs, they've been creating video content for a very long time, and it becomes even more apparent. Okay, they're creating video content. Why? So they can reach a massive audience. It
Yeah.
becomes a factor of scalability. And with podcasting, I think we're kind of doing the similar thing because we're creating content for the masses. We're creating content for a niche audience.
Hmm.
And so as I began to do that, I started to learn and grow from my own mistakes, from my own failures, and figure out, okay, this is the proper way to do it. And then continue to pivot, continue to modify as I'm building the business and growing it. And it's been fascinating. And on the podcast side, I've interviewed over 400 guests on my own podcast, entrepreneurs from all walks of life. And somebody actually mentioned, Junaid, I like about you that you don't discriminate around who you bring on the podcast.
Hmm.
I'm like, yes, that's true, because I don't know who's going to be listening to the podcast. What I want to show them and highlight to the audience is that anything is possible, no matter where your mindset is, no matter what you're passionate about. You can make that into a business. And in part, it also is kind of like documenting a for eternity for my kids to follow along to. Like my youngest
Yeah.
is 1 year old now, right? And before he actually starts to understand what dad is doing, it's probably going to be the next 5 to 6 years that he can start to apprehend and understand, okay, this is what dad's up to. Now, and that's one of the reasons I love to have this conversation. That's basically what I've been working on.
It's so cool, and I'm sitting here excited about doing like 100 interviews. You have 4 times as many, and it's crazy to think about too. Your show is actually a lot like mine, where we talk about a lot of different things. We don't have a specific niche per se. Our niche is polymathy or hacks and hobbies, and those kind of allow. There's almost like a meta niche. That's what I mean.
Hmm.
And so we can go into many different subtopics because that meta niche gives us permission. And I think those are some of the more fun shows to do, because then you have no discrimination. You have no limit on what you can talk about,
Yeah.
which is really
I
nice.
think the other thing that has helped me become more clear. So initially, I would hear this message from Pat Flynn, you got to niche down. The riches are in the niches. And like, yes, how do I do that? I had no clue, right?
Yeah.
But as I started speaking to more and more people, and as I started becoming aware of who I am,
Mhm.
I was like, okay, now I have more clarity. Now I can niche down. So just recently, I added this phrase on the podcast cover for my own podcast saying, passion to profit stories from entrepreneurs.
Mm.
So that showcases that this is a very specific podcast on these stories and what you can learn. And I've been very intentional on the podcast topics or titles and how I frame them.
Yeah.
And they're all in the frame of how to dot 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 about dot 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 in this time period. So it's helped me become more and more clear about my matter and the topics that I'm having. And then the questions that I'm asking has also evolved. Like initially I was like just asking, okay, just tell me about your life story and I'll pick things out of there. But now I'm being more specific on, okay, I'm teaching this class to entrepreneurs. What message do you have for students?
Mhm.
What message do you have for budding entrepreneurs? What message do you have for entrepreneurs that have been in the race and they're feeling down? Because these are people that have gone from zero to hero. Yesterday, I spoke with this gentleman, and he went from computer engineering to Hollywood studio, becoming a TV studio, then going into game design, working for Sega, then going and creating his own game design company, and now launching his own um, entrepreneurship um, accelerator program where he can bring in, and he's working with 20 different countries, 50 different partners all over the world. I'm like, that is a very specific path that he's taken. And he said, well, I just followed my passion. I just followed where the entire industry was heading. And it was really amazing to have this conversation with him.
Be sure to connect me with him because that sounds like a good guest for this show. And one thing I want to highlight too is that you are a generalist. Like it's one of those things where you have many different skills, you've employed them, you're polymathic in a way because of that. And one thing that's very interesting, and I really want to share this because I've learned this on my own journey, but talking to people on the show has really highlighted it to me more and more over and over and over again. And it also comes from the book Range too, where people like to dabble, they like to go wide because they're experimenting. They're trying to find what works and what
Mm-hmm.
sticks. And once they do, they narrow down and go into it. But here's the deal,
Yeah.
it doesn't just stay like that. It's more of an hourglass because eventually you go to that one thing for so long, get a little bored of it, maybe you're curious about something new, and you go wide again, close
Mm-hmm.
in, wide again, and it's a cycle. And a lot of people don't realize that. And your niches are the same way. Sure, niche down, niche down, niche down. But who's to say you have to niche down completely? And on top of that, you may go wider for a little bit and then niche down. So we see this in gaming creators. Well, they might start off with just Fortnite or Call of Duty, and then
Mm-hmm.
eventually they spread out because they get bored of doing
Yes.
just one thing.
No, you're absolutely right. And if you were to say you're niching down to, let's say, just home studios, but there's a broad aspect to home studios. All of the elements, that's where you get wide. Okay, you have five different things that you're talking about inside a home studio. So now that's that broad aspect again. Well, how do you go deeper? Well, let's go deeper about just camera. So now you're niching down. Okay, just using this camera, and then go deeper into everything that the camera does. So you're absolutely right. I like that analogy of it's almost like a sine wave. Going through that journey.
It really is. And I talk about like skill tree based learning. Like, let's say you want to learn how to build a house. Well, you have to learn carpentry, you have to learn wiring
Mm-hmm.
for electricity, you have to learn the plumbing, you have to learn the blueprints, which is the big picture of how to build a house. Same thing with home studios. You have the cameras, you have the microphones, so video and audio, you have the screens that you're using and the type of computers that you might be using. You might have, on top of that, the desk and the actual layout of the room, sound
Mm-hmm.
dampening. So there's the physical layout, there's the computational, there's the video, there's the audio. You know this, but I'm just saying for the audience sake. And then
Yeah.
each one is its own path, but they all come together as a home studio as well. So it kind of gets me to one of your questions as well. You're starting up a new podcast. So what are your plans about that?
So the new podcast was something that I thought about last year, calling it the Home Studio Show, and I was like, I'm going to highlight shows and highlight guests and their podcast or their video setup and how they were to achieve it. Or if I were to bring somebody new on the podcast and basically essentially critique their setup and tell them, hey, this is what you can do
Mm.
to level up your look and feel and stand out from the crowd. So that was the idea behind the podcast. But again, it takes a lot of energy to start something brand new. And I'm
Yeah.
just focusing on uh, supporting the clients and supporting the people that I have currently to make sure that they're standing out.
Maybe what you could do is offer the clients a free hour consultation and just ask them to record it in exchange, and then you could just have a few episodes to start off with, even if they're not perfect.
That's so true.
But like,
No, that's definitely a great idea. Uh, I'll dig into it.
while my setup is relatively not novel, but just simple, maybe we could talk about going on the show down the line when you're ready for it. But
Sure.
something I wanted to ask you in person back at the Pod Movement conference. I miss it so much already. But I sadly forgot until I literally got to my Airbnb that night. How has your home tech setup changed over the last, I guess, couple of years or so?
That's a great question, and it's grown a lot, right? Initially I just started with a single camera,
Mhm.
and I practiced and practiced and practiced looking at the camera
It's
lens.
so hard.
And even though the conversation is happening down here, I want to make sure that I'm creating content and looking straight ahead to my guest or the host that I'm speaking with. So I practice and practice, and then over time I added more lighting, I added more cameras, I added more screens, I added a teleprompter, which totally game changer. So I've added a lot of things in the space to make it more appealing, to make it more comfortable for myself. In fact, I have a mount for
Mhm.
my phone right here, so
Oh,
I can have my phone standing in front of me and record content that way as well. But again, everything grows from that initial budding of your setup, right?
it definitely does. And how you experiment and where you grow, what you learn. Like I bought a $30 mic on Amazon. I realized how crappy it was. I was like, I need to get a nicer
Hmm.
mic kind of thing. You learn
Yeah.
from those lessons. I like how you have that phone off to the side too, because I actually bought the Logitech Stream Cam because you can
Hmm.
rotate it.
Yeah.
And since it has the accelerometer, most softwares work automatically when it's rotated. So unlike having to
Nice.
go in there manually adjust it to vertical. And so what I was thinking is that down the line, when I do end up getting either like a camera, like you showed me before our call, we were talking about cameras, or like a Facecam Pro, whatever I end up getting, I'll have
Hmm.
that as my main one there. Then I could put the stream cam in vertical mode to the side and be able to make
Yeah,
TikToks super easily, shorts really easily.
absolutely.
There's also this really cool camera I saw where it has like a little line down to the middle of the screen, so you could look
Hmm.
at the person on the screen, but the camera's right there, so it looks like you're looking at the camera, but also looking at them at the same time. It's probably low
Yeah,
quality, but still.
it's so the way that it works, it actually you can use that right now with your webcam. The way it works, it's just a simple plexiglass hanger
Hmm.
that goes on top of your monitor, and then it holds that camera right in front of your monitor where your guest might be sitting or the video might be sitting. And then you can then position the monitor higher up so that you're now looking directly at them and in the camera at the same time.
That's actually a better idea. This was just a product where the actual camera itself was extended down, but I feel like having
Hmm.
a much better camera or at least webcam or something like that using the plexiglass will be a way better solution because then you actually have good quality.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So you were mentioning your family earlier, and you have a lovely family, and you bring them into your content a lot, it seems, actually as well. How has that been all for you?
Well, it's all to teach them that anything is possible
Mm-hmm.
and that they're welcome to come in the studio whenever I'm either having a conversation or recording a live setup, because the fact of the matter is this technology has been around for almost 15 plus years. I mean,
Yeah.
social media has been around for 15 plus years. Live streams have been around for about 10 years, and it's going to continue to grow, and this is not going away.
Yeah.
So getting them to be comfortable in front of the camera, getting them to be comfortable to speaking to other people online,
Huh.
not just anybody, but somebody in the having that same positive mindset, the growth mindset and whatnot. So it enables them and exposes them. Oh wow, we're talking about these awesome ideas and topics, as opposed to talking about other things that don't help you grow. So exposing them for that from that perspective. Now, fun fact: my two older sons, they have their own YouTube channel as well.
That's
So
so
they've
cool.
created content on there for the past 3 years, and it's been slow recently because school is busy, but they were creating daily content on not only the toys that they're playing with, but then eventually they got comfortable enough to put their faces on the video as well. So it started with like if you saw their first videos, all you see is hands moving around these toys, and they're transforming some transformers or whatever, and then playing with Lego pullback cars, and then now you can see their faces. Now they're like in full frame and then doing all these fun activities and whatnot. So it also is a way for you to grow
Yeah.
uh, as well.
Well, and I know there's like high dichotomy of like privacy, like people don't want their kids to be on camera, but then on top of that too, you're taking it the opposite approach where you're training them because it's going to be part of just who we are in
Hmm.
general as a society. So I like how the way you're approaching things more because allowing them to get comfortable on camera. I like people. I talk to so many
Hmm.
people at Podmove, for example, right? I can communicate very simply in person, but when I
Yeah,
first started doing videos, it was so hard to get
it's
comfortable
so
on
hard.
camera.
Yeah.
And the same thing with audio too. I think it took me less time to get used to hearing my own voice than it did to be on
Hmm.
camera. But that was a skill that I had to learn through just sheer
Yeah.
practice. And you're doing it so young for them too.
Yep. Absolutely. And that's something that I had to struggle through myself. Like initially, when I just started a podcast in 2018, I was just talking to myself, right, on my iPhone, on my iPad, in my car. And then I was like, okay, let me start introducing people or bringing people on the podcast. So that's when I was doing these Zoom calls or doing these Riverside calls
Yeah.
and talking to them on video, but not really utilizing the video because I didn't still hadn't mastered that space for my own studio. And then eventually with the pandemic, everything just accelerated
Oh my gosh.
to where I got to today.
I love hearing that again because back in the day when we were doing so many interviews in 2020, the COVID accelerant kind of topic was very, very prevalent. And just to quickly mention, the show is powered by Riverside.fm. And I wanted to actually talk to you about that too, because I think our journey was kind of similar in nature, where I actually started back in 2017, but I had essentially three podcasts that were
Hmm.
pretty much the same topic: self-education, self-development, and stuff like that. And I actually remember using Anchor.fm on my phone to
Yep.
record half of them for the third one.
Yeah.
And in 2020 is when everyone was stuck at home. It was a great opportunity to start doing interviews. I decided that I wanted to do it. But on my main Polycast feed, I only had 2 episodes because I was still planning
Mm.
on doing more solo casts first. But I kind of pivoted because I was like, obviously, there's opportunity here. But I realized if I invite someone on and they only see 2 episodes, that perception is going to think I'm not that good at what I'm doing, even though I had been doing it for
Right.
3 years at that point. And so I decided to combine all three of those shows into the first season of the show.
Ah,
All,
interesting.
also, because they're all basically the same topic, just different names of the shows. I was like, okay, that works because it is the same material, and we're going to be talking about that stuff anyways in the interviews.
Yeah.
And so I decided to do 42 episodes, the meaning of life, as a season number.
Nice.
And so from then on, like 42 episodes is my season length, which is something also I'm curious about in your opinion, like how long should seasons be? But then I started doing interviews. And so like what was your kind
Mhm.
of journey from solo cast to interviews? And then a side question, what is your opinion on season lengths?
That's a good question. So my first season was mostly solo. Towards the end, I interviewed some guests, and it it was all in 2018, and I ended up with 68 episodes.
Hmm,
Now,
pretty hefty season.
seasons past the first season, every season has had 100 episodes,
Okay.
right? So I just go from 200 all the way to 299, 300 all the way to 399. But I wish that I started with zero.
Mm,
because even though I'm in season 5, episode 36, I still have, total produced is 400 episodes, right? So I was like, I wish I'd started with 0. So then it would be like, okay, this is like literally how many episodes I've produced.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of like a, hindsight, I should have done that, but it doesn't really matter because the conversation that I'm having, the growth that I've had has all been monumental. And at that point, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So the question around, you mentioned solo versus interview. Now, the solos are really great because you're building audience, you're building people, or you're building that connection with the people listening to the podcast.
Yeah.
They understand who you are and they trust you.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we start bringing on guests, we're now giving a platform to these guests to say, hey, I have 2,000 people that listen to me every single day or every single week on my podcast. And I am introducing you to these 2,000 new people.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, that's why people want to come and be guests on other podcasts, because they know that they've built an audience already. So you're kind of doing them a favor. You're bringing value to them. You're making sure that their content is well thought out. And I mean, you're asking questions from the perspective of how you are and what your audience has known you for. So that's the two things. So what I tried to do in the middle is I was like, I'm going to do Monday motivation episodes. Probably lasted like 2 months, and I was like, okay, I can't do this. It was kind of hard.
Yeah.
And then there was even some time where on Monday I would say, hey, this week we're gonna have 4 new episodes, and they're gonna be on these different topics, blah blah blah, people. And then the 4 episodes will be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I'm talking, have 4. Like, so I was doing daily
Yeah, it's hard.
publishing. It was kind of crazy. I'm like, what am I doing? Then eventually went to kind of like a weekly publish. And then between 22 and 23, I was doing just a weekly publishing schedule. So season 4 actually went from 2022 all the way to 2021 to 2022, something like that. I gotta look at it. But then when season 5 arrived, I was like, okay, I need to speed up the publication because a lot of people, I had 50 plus episodes recorded, nothing published.
Oh no.
So people are waiting for like 6 months, like, hey, when's my episode going to come out?
I think
It's
I was
probably
one of
gonna
those
be in the
guys. I was messaging you like, hey, when's my episode coming out?
Exactly. So I was like, okay, let me speed it up. And then I started doing 2 episodes a week. So Tuesdays and Thursdays is when the episode dropped.
Man.
And what I've done recently is like, okay, how about we slow it down? And because I'm done with all the episodes, I want to reintroduce who I am. So now what I'm doing is on Tuesdays, you'll hear a solo episode from Junaid, a reflection on what we talked about on the last episode, and reflection on how I'm doing with business and what you should be doing as a podcaster or an entrepreneur. And then on Thursdays, when I highlight the guest on the podcast. And then so that's the model I've scheduled out
much more
for the rest year.
Yeah.
Is, hey, I'm going to be doing I think it's the odd number episodes are solo, and then the even number episodes are for guests.
I really like that, and I love hearing your journey because there was a lot of similarities too. Like, this is an interview about you, but I do want to like touch on this because it's so funny.
Yes.
First off, just something that was on top of mind. I want to get it off my head. It might not be that hard. I mean, tedious, but you could just go back to the beginning and just renumber all your shows and do it that way. But I do understand when you have multiple series, it's really interesting about the numbering, because do you want a number per series or number per the show itself? So
Exactly.
I had 3 links, but like almost like 6 series. And so I had my Fireside Micro Polycast, which was that Anchor.fm one that I had, which when I started the first season, it was like 17 episodes. Now it's upwards of like 64. And
Nice.
for that series alone. And then I had the Medium link, which was either my Poly and content, like my main series that I just chopped into audio and threw it on there, or like a medium length polycast, which I've made like 4 of them out of the 200 something episodes. So it really
Yeah.
doesn't count at that point. And then I had the long form interviews, which already have 2 or 3 different series for interviews. But I realized that first off, the poly content kind of just didn't really flow right within that channel. I always kind of thought that maybe you should have all your audio in the same channel, just like with YouTube, and you definitely should have more than one series. But due to the conference we went to, I started thinking about restructuring it. I'm actually going to probably take the poly content out and give it its own stream and just have it on its own thing, which is going to be difficult to kind of move and get started on. But I think that's going to simplify the feed, because I literally watched somebody look through my feed on the airplane back, and she got stopped once or twice by poly and content episodes, because that series does not have a specific topic. It's a strategy, like a blog post, video, and audio all in one. And so that's the actual series, is the strategy, not the topic. And so I kind of just threw it on there. So the topics could be so random. So she got stopped and like was distracted by that instead of looking at the interviews and solo casts. And so I realized too, since I do the medium length solo cast so infrequently, that I could just categorize that as the fireside micro polycast, have that as my solo cast stuff, and then do interviews. And I have 2 types then, just the solo and the interviews like you're doing. And that restructuring is what I'm working on right now. But I think that it's a fascinating topic. Series, how many episodes, how do you count it? These are things that podcasters don't think about as much.
Yeah.
Or not enough, at least.
No, absolutely. The other thing that some folks are doing is they'll do like a 4-part episode with the same guest. In which way? So they'll have the interview, and they'll have 2 interviews. One interview is about the origin story. The other interview is about how they did the things. And then he'll have another episode where he'll talk about that guest with his co-host. And then the 4th episode where he'll have all the rundown of what he learned from talking to the guest and the co-host. So it's kind of like 4-part episode on the same topic. So you're kind of giving a much deeper meaning and much deeper connection or attention to a specific topic. And I think he's done really well on his podcast.
Well, and it's also taking that one moment and stretching it out farther. It's not really repurposing in this case, but it's more of just like reusing and refactoring, if you will. And that way you can take that one episode even much more farther. Speaking of repurposing, what do you do to make your clips and stuff like that?
So I recently was introduced to Opus clip by you. Thank you so much. And I've also, so you had mentioned it, and then I saw Nick Niman's video on YouTube, and he mentioned it as well. I was like, okay, let me give this a shot. And it's a really cool tool where I can literally ask it to pull any of my videos from my YouTube and create like small piece of content. So that's been really good. The next step I need to do is start putting in videos from these podcast episodes. Now, they're all mostly recorded on Zoom, and I like how Opus Clip is able to detect the 2 audios and then put those stuff top and bottom together, reframing it. So that's been a stick, that's been something that I haven't been able to focus on, and my teammate is actually learning video editing in her own language so that she she can do all the right stuff. And so it's all going to come down on her shoulder to be able to put the stuff together. And then I'll get her a Opus Clip subscription so that she can start creating a massive amount of content. Right now we're just posting text and images on the podcast as if it was 2013.
I didn't say 2013. No, 2020. Yeah, let's go that way.
2013. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I definitely understand the importance of quote images, and I wasn't necessarily trying to prompt you to say Opus, but yeah, Opus is one of my brand partners, and I do like talking about them. And I'm so glad I got to introduce them to you, because I've used so many content repurposing tools, but none of them got me off my ass to actually do it. And Opus was so simple that it just made me go through 110 interviews and 200 videos total just to repurpose it all.
That's amazing.
And I was also kind of curious too, because you do really good show notes, like blog posts for each interview. And I had this kind of cool idea. I used this AI summarizing tool to make an AI summary of the video. Then I'm going to do my mental model analysis of each polymathic guest, like what's their polymathic mental model. And then the YouTube description, the timestamps, the links, and then the actual transcription of the video. And that way, the first half is more for humans so they can enjoy it and get something out of it.
Yeah.
And then the whole thing is good for SEO. But what do you do for your show? Because I'm curious about that just for my own learning sake.
So very recently, so for at least, I mean, when ChatGPT came out, I was like, okay, this is very powerful. And I was already grabbing transcript for all of my episodes using Otter.ai. And using that tool, it just automatically creates the content for us. And recently, when ChatGPT came out, I was like, hey, we're going to be doing this with all the episodes. We'll grab the text from the transcript, drop it into ChatGPT, and ask it to create show notes. Because initially, we were doing it all manually. So we get to save a ton of time using AI tools. And then I ran into a tool called CapShow.
Yep.
CapShow.com is a very, very powerful tool. It'll do all of the things that we were doing manually and save us at least a good amount of time, anywhere from an hour to 2 hours of creating content. They do it all automatically. And simplest thing, once you've uploaded your audio, don't have to upload the transcript, just upload the audio. They'll transcribe it. They'll create all the content for social media posts, for LinkedIn, for blog posts. And then you can simply click a button called export, which will give you a Word document with all of the things for each episode, so that now you can hand that over to your team and then they can start promoting your podcast episode.
I love that. There's actually a handful of tools like CapShow, but I feel like CapShow is one of the top ones in that field. I think there's, I can't think of off the top of my head because podcasts are something different, I think, but there's a handful of them out there. And I remember talking to the CapShow team at Podmove too, and they're just so energetic and so excited about it. And I definitely love some of these repurposing tools. Once I can afford it, definitely want to start using more of them because I need to automate some of that process. I still haven't gotten around to doing I got most of my videos transcribed, but the problem with my show is we talk about, polymath and multidisciplinary stuff. And for some reason, these AI ears cannot hear those words. And so even my name, Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator, like they'll mess up Dustin or PolyInnovator, stuff like that multiple times in the transcript. Sure. So I have to go in and manually edit each one. I know that for a fact. I tried using Otter. It still wasn't very perfect. I tried using Riverside's transcriptions, and it's pretty good for the most part. But even many tools, I just like, it's good. I just need to get these transcribed and I'll edit them later. But that's a hard part of the show.
The transcription is great for people to read, but it's even better for you to create content off of it. So, for example, YouTube is already transcribing your video, right? So as they're transcribing your video, that transcription is easily accessible by ChatGPT through their plugins. So in ChatGPT, if you enable plugins, you can use a plugin called Video Script, and then paste the link of your video in the chat. I'm like, hey, can you pull the transcript for this and give me bullet points on what this video talks about?
Yeah.
And boom, you're basically letting ChatGPT do that work for you.
You and I could both go on a tangent at AI. We might end up doing it anyways. But there's a tool called brevity.sh that does the AI summary, I feel like, even better than ChatGPT, because there's a lot of those summarizing tools out there, but a lot of them are just extensions and they're not really that good. This one gives you, I definitely recommend doing the Pro on Brevity because it's like $5, $6, but it gives you more. And so it gives you like different, headlines, different bullet points, different summary aspects to it. And that's what I use to summarize it. But ChatGPT in particular, I think, especially with GPT-4, is still really good too, especially since if you can't afford doing multiple tools.
Yeah, so here's the thing with the tools. They're all running on a type of model which is, a large language model. It's able to understand all the things that you throw at it because it's been trained. So what Brevity Pro is probably doing is they're training their model to say, hey, write it in this format. So for ChatGPT, you got to give it prompts on, hey, write it in this style or write it in this style of writing. So as you train it, it gets it understands who you are and it understands the type of content that you're looking for in the output. And that's exactly what Capsho has done. After a year and a half of running that software, they're able to train the model and create templates around, hey, this is the type of content that works really well. Create more of it. So it's all about training. Just like you and I went through this process of podcasting for
Yeah.
so many years, we've trained ourselves to be better podcasters.
Mhm.
So just like that, when you start with a base ChatGPT model, it doesn't know a whole lot except for what it's learned from the past.
Yeah.
But as you give it more content, it's going to understand, and basically the things that it's giving you, the things that it's giving you are based off of your transcript and your conversations.
I love this discussion because it's making me nerdy. It's funny because a lot of these tools are basically doing that. Even Opus is training its own model based off of ChatGPT. Like it uses ChatGPT or GPT-4, whatever the term will be. And all these specialized tools are refining their own models, Capsho too. And I have a post that I've been putting off for the last like 3 months, but it's been one
Mhm.
that I think is really fascinating. No one really talked about is that ChatGPT is a generalist, not a specialist, and understanding that is very important because generalist is not a bad thing. People always think if you're dabbling, it's bad. It's not bad. It's just you don't want to spend too much time doing that, dabble and choose, or juggle a few different things well. But being a generalist also means that there's going to be some areas, like if you're trying to do medical field, for example, you need to be a specialist in that before you can do anything else because you need to know the deep level of knowledge.
Yeah.
And whereas these other tools like Capsho and Opus, they're doing the more specialized approach as well.
No, you're absolutely correct. And when you say that ChatGPT is a generalist, for most people it is a generalist because they only have so much knowledge. For example, I use ChatGPT to create dashboards for a specific applications.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have expertise in that area, I'm able to ask very specific questions
Because you
and
know.
get very specific data from it, right?
Yeah.
So you got to be a specialist in the space that you're looking into grow for it to be able to help you get better or results and more concise information.
Well, that's why prompt engineering is so important too, because everyone's like, "Oh, AI is going to replace our jobs." No, no, it's not. It's people who know how to use AI that are going to replace your jobs.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, man, I want to ask your next question here, but I wanted to mention this real quick. The one thing that got me into ChatGPT so heavily back in January was that I love Pokemon. I love that series. I learned graphic design through making 2D characters from the Pokemon series.
Hmm.
That's how I learned color theory and everything like that. And I was using ChatGPT to flesh out an idea for my own IP, right? My own Pokemon game, essentially. And I was able to
Sure.
flesh out the plot and all the quests and all these different ideas and change all the terms to my own terms so that way there's no copyright. And it's amazing how this tool, I knew game development, I knew what I wanted from it, but that's the only reason why it was able to help me because I knew what I needed to
Exactly.
ask.
No, you're 100% right. And if you already know game development and you already know story development, you can ask it to help you get faster to a place that you're going. And because it has knowledge on programming, you can also have you can also have it write the programming text that you can then implement
Mhm.
and go into the development of applications and start building out those scenes too.
Well, I'm definitely not necessarily good at the programming side of things. That's what I spent a lot of time learning. But I do know the rest of the game development world, like the actual plot design, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I digress. We finally got to meet in person, and I really want to touch on this because that was so much fun. And there was only about half a dozen people who I knew prior to going to Pod Movement, and me just getting to Pod
Mhm.
Movement was a whole ordeal. So I'm really glad I was able to meet you in person and talk to you in person at the Podcast Movement Conference. And so, how was the expo for you, in your opinion? I know you were at that booth quite a bit, but in general.
Yeah, so I go to the expos now to meet people in the industry, meet other people in the industry, because all the topics that the speakers are talking about are very powerful topics. They're for people who have not learned those topics, and so that's why they're putting these things together. Luckily for me, I've been in this space for so long that I like, okay, I know what they're talking
Yeah.
about. I get the gist of it. But then when you do listen, you will pick up things. Even if you pick up one little thing that you can implement, it's a game changer.
Mhm.
But so for me, it was great because I got to meet the people that I know, and it's almost like I knew everybody. And then the more times I show up at Podcast Movement, they recognize you. So it's been like I've been going to these events for about 2 years now,
Mhm.
and it's been pretty awesome for that. We had podcast studios set up for recording podcasts for guests and hosts, so they could book a time and they could come in and record their own episode for their own shows. And in fact, we were able to uh, capture about 32 podcasts,
Yeah.
and one of them was the one I got to speak with you in person.
Well, I wish I had known that you could sign up because I did not know that the first couple of days. Like I didn't know that until the Wednesday we're actually met, and that was at the end of the day.
Hmm.
But because I would have signed up for a time. But that booth with Yap Media was really cool. It was well made. I wish there was a little bit more sound dampening though, because I definitely realized in
Hmm.
the recording. Also, did you enhance it before sending it to me? Because I definitely noticed.
Yes. Yes. So I did enhancement for all the audios using Adobe
Yeah.
Podcast Enhance. So it sounds a little bit better than what the audio
Yeah.
captured. There was no sound dampening at all in that booth, and I wish there was. And then, yeah, there's always tweaks that you can do to make the sound better. So hopefully next time around, it's in a much quieter
Yeah.
place. We'll
It
see.
was really good still. And you know what's really funny? Before I realized you had done that, I ran it through Adobe Podcast Enhance. Like I realized, why does it sound so tinny? It's because it ran through
Mhm.
twice. And I didn't realize that until I looked at
Yes.
it again. Oh, I don't need to enhance. It's already enhanced. Cool. Because I just automatically did it once I yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's funny.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it was really cool and I really enjoyed just that booth in general. It was well made. And just going around the different booths because my opinion going in was the same as yours. Like there wasn't really much that these people were on these panels were going to tell me that I didn't already know, which sounds
Hmm.
egotistical. I get that. But you and I both have been in the space for so long. We spend so much time self-teaching that we know what we want to know. And there was a couple of things like AI generative that I was like, I'm curious what they're going to say about that. But for the most part, these panels were low hanging fruit or medium hanging fruit when it comes to that. Like if you're a new podcaster, it's going to be mind blowing.
Yeah.
And so I focused on just meeting people, just going around, talking to as many people as possible. And I think that was the best option too, just because that way it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah, the other thing that I do on these events is I'll go and talk to everybody who spent the time and money
Yeah.
to put a booth together, because they're there to meet new people.
Mm.
And those are people in the industry. So if you get connected with them and they know what services that you're offering or what kind of work that you do, you can make some really good relationships and build connections
Mm.
that previously were like, how do I find a person in this space? Well, here they are. They're already here for you to talk to. I mean, they had a booth from Riverside. The No Mono
That
people
was
were
so
really
cool.
good.
Yeah, I went there.
StreamYard, Resound, like there were some really good companies that I got to speak with and talk to.
There was one called Asha. It's like a French company that's just moving to the US. And they're a podcast host, but they're also like repurposing a social media management tool all in one. And I really like that polymathic approach to it. And so when I make my poly content new podcast feed, I'm
Hmm.
honestly strongly considering them at this point because of that tool. And how they presented themselves. I did realize that like I had gone to maybe 90% of the booths, or on the first day I went to around 75, 80% of them. And I kind of ignored some.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, I don't need Podcast DB or something like that. Or I don't really need to look at all these fancy microphones because I have mine. I'm not gonna go XLR for a while. I don't need to look at them.
Yeah.
But I realized the second day on Wednesday that like I need to get past my own bias and talk to them. Like you said, first off, the people is what's most important, anyways. But then
Exactly.
learning about these tools or these booths or like the equipment would be a good idea. And I went to some more of
Yeah.
them. I still missed a few, and I kind of regret that. I should have gone to every single booth, and I think that's what I'll do next
Hmm.
time: is every single booth.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's the people that are there, and what I started doing is that instead of grabbing their business cards, I was like, hey, how about we book a time on my calendar so that we
Mhm.
can have a conversation, so that you don't have to worry about following up and I don't have to worry about following up, and we can move move forward.
Well, and I wish I took more advantage of those meeting things too. I just really didn't have a grasp on getting those down, like the little brain dates and stuff like that. I only did two, and one of them was with Sun Yi, who's a personal branding expert, and he was really cool. Like,
Yeah.
he was the one person I contacted before the podcast movement that I didn't know, and I was like, I want to talk
Nice.
to you, and we had a nice, cool meeting with both. This is how you and I are nerding out. We are nerding out about tools too. But
That's right. That's right.
so one thing I see is that videos, podcasts, and blog posts, they're all pillar content. They're all these main things that you could choose from. Everybody generally starts with one. Like, I was blogging, for example, but it's good to do all three, especially if you're able to handle it and you can do all three decently well. But it takes time, takes practice, obviously. What was your main pillar one first? Was it video or podcast? And how have you grown since that start?
My first pillar was also blogging. I've been blogging since 2004. You can see it on different sites that I ran, TechnoJunkie, SuperJunaid.com, and I just created content for the sake of creating content. I was like, okay, I need to write something, but I wasn't really specific. I knew that I love technology, so I talked about tech on TechnoJunkie. But then that was my initial piece, and I didn't know that you could be guest writer on other blogs. That would have been really cool. And then as I discovered blogging or podcasting, and then bringing guests on my podcast, and then Seth Godin had posted this comment that guesting on podcasts is almost like guesting on a blog post. Like, holy smokes, I never did that.
Well,
So that's how I got started.
I'm kind of mad at myself because I know we talked about that the first time you came on the show. Granted, it was a few years ago, so it's fair, but like, I should have remembered that because I remember doing the research and looking at those old sites too. I have Super Junaid here on the links for people wanting to check out after the show. But besides the podcast that you're about to start as well, what's next for you on your journey?
Just keep assisting other small businesses to launch podcasts so that they can nurture their audience, they can build their brands, and they can essentially make more money through podcasting.
I love that. And we talked about my partners, Riverside and Opus, but do you have any partners you want to shout out to? I want to give you a chance for that.
So partners, technically, I mean, it's the software that I use. So anytime I'm creating content, anytime I'm recording videos or doing my podcast recording, I'm using Ecamm Live because I'm able to do multi-purpose content creation with it. So that's a really powerful tool, powerful community that I've been using. Hardware-wise, I totally love the A10 Mini Pro because I'm able to record isolated content through multiple platforms, through multiple channels into a single device, and I can then repurpose content from it. So again, more and more tools are enabling ISO content.
Yeah.
For example, even though we're looking at these squares next to each other here on Riverside, it's creating, isolated content for just my video and just your video, all recorded locally. So again, these tools are going to all start looking like each other because guess what? We as human beings look like each other. We have two nose, an eye, a mouth, two eyes, a nose, not two noses, two eyes, a nose, right? So just like we look like each other, all the software is developed by humans. So we want the similar functionality, similar tools built into our products. And that's why everything looks the same. And so people are more comfortable. And how you get to learn about that tool is through the people who are creating these tools, to you and I.
Well, we'll put our affiliate links down in the description for us there because I don't normally ask for that, but considering you and I both are related to tools,
Yeah.
I was like, this is an episode where I should ask that. And then what would be a call to growth for the audience to do?
So one thing that I always tell everybody and my clients and my students is to get started with just get started right now, because as you get started, you are going to start building that podcast muscle. You're going to start building that video muscle. You're going to build that speech muscle. And the more you work on it, the better you're going to get at it. And sometimes even faster than others because you're getting that immediate feedback from that recording.
And on top of that, too, the world is getting more and more connected. And one thing that I'm kind of worried about as a creator is when all these other countries are getting kind of up to par where we're at. Because if you look at some other markets, they're kind of behind on the social media and internet timelines, which is great. Like if you want to go to Brazil, you can create content there that was really popular 3 years ago in the US, but down there it hasn't really happened yet. You can kind of take advantage of that time difference, if you will. But now that everything's getting more and more connected and more people are getting online, there's going to be way more content creators. And so you want to get your foot in the door as soon as possible, plant your flag.
Actually, talking about content creators, they have these social selling factories around the world. So I saw this video on TikTok or something. In Indonesia, they have this huge building, and in each room, which is probably about 5 foot by 5 foot, 6 foot by 6 foot, they have a camera on one end, and on the other side, there's a person selling a product, and they're live streaming.
That's crazy.
Tens, probably 50 to 60 people creating live streams from that social selling factory.
Jeez.
And all they're doing is selling a product on a live stream because people connect with people.
Yeah.
We don't need, like small companies, they don't need celebrities anymore.
Yeah.
They want anybody regular, like TikTok Shop. Everybody's talking about TikTok Shop. Have you heard of what TikTok Shop is? Like, holy smokes, what's going on? It's social selling.
Yeah.
People are like, oh my God, I'm using this, blah, blah, blah. Go to the TikTok Shop and you can get it for blah, 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 $5 or more. It's free shipping. Like, this is insane. They've
Yeah.
converted every single creator on their own platform
Mhm.
into sellers of products that they can mass produce in China, mass produce in other countries, and sell it at such a discount and make a ton of money.
So there's this tool that I found recently where it's called Koji, where it's like start selling on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube with a few taps of a button. With Koji.com. And essentially you could do digital products like you would with Gumroad or something like that, but it's made for doing it
Mhm.
on TikTok, kind of what you're saying there. So if you have a book that you're trying to release, I might actually put my book on this. And that way you could do
Yeah.
ads on TikTok doing like, hey, this is my book, here's how to swim, whatever, link to that. It's crazy how like efficient that is. You just create a little quick page on there and boom, make the
Mhm.
ad, call it a day.
No, it's so powerful because this is how people are spending money.
Yeah.
This is where people are buying stuff. Like, what was the last time you actually went to a physical store to buy something? Or when was the last time that you used your computer to buy
I
something?
bought it on my phone.
It's most of the times on your phone, right? You're spending money, you're linked with Apple Pay, you're linked with Face ID, you can pay immediately and have that instant gratification of buying something. And then the thing shows up next day on your doorstep. So yeah, this is no this is where the world is going. This is where the world is going, and this is so powerful.
It's almost scary in a way, but it's a good thing. We can definitely take a good advantage of it. But once again, Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator, and Junaid Ahmed on the Polymath Polycast. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks so much, Justin. This was so much fun.